I took it off because
Oh, okay,
of my
well, I
control
think
buck
we
thing.
just need,
I move approval of the agenda.
yes, thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, I think our next line item, Mr. President?
Madam Chair, members of the board, and guests in the audience, many of you have already seen what I'm going to go through, but I do need to go through it again for public purposes at the meeting. As I've stated before, Santa Fe Community College is facing a very severe financial challenge. It's a cash flow problem, as well as a revenue and expenditure problem, and it is a problem that we have to figure out how to solve this year. That's the bad news. The best news is, though, it is something that we can fix pretty much in one fiscal year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem, how we got here, and my recommended way out. And I'm going to ask the board to approve a restructuring plan for the college, as well as some cost cuts as we go forward. Just the right arrow? Okay. So here's the problem. We have a $5 million problem that we have to fix this year. $3 million of those dollars are ongoing costs, which means costs that will recur year after year if we don't do something about them. And $2 million of them can be one-time costs that can be adjusted. If we don't fix this problem, we do not have enough cash to pay our bills in October, November, and December of this year. And it would even be a challenge going forward unless we implement what's in this plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got there and what my solution is. But before we do that, I just want to give a little overview of where our revenues come from. As a college as a total, our budget for this year is roughly $55 million. Of that, about $35 million of it is what is known as instruction and general funding. That's our operating funding. About $15 million of it is grants, restricted funds from grants, federal, state, local. And then the balance of it is unrestricted plant funds. And I may be just a little off in those numbers there, but we can't use restricted cash for anything other than restricted projects, which means we can't use revenues from the sale of bonds for anything other than the capital projects for which those bonds were approved. So what's on the screen right now is a snapshot of our instruction and general revenues and expenses over the last 8 years, starting with the year that ended June 30th, 2007, through the last fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2014. And you can see, for the most part, our revenues have grown each year, and our expenses have grown each year. And just to let you know, those revenues are made up by the tuition and fees paid by our students, by our state appropriation that's approved by the legislature, by our local mill levy that's been approved by our voters, and then there's a few other sources that are pretty minor in that. Of those revenues, right now, about 12% of our budget comes from tuition and fees, about 25% comes from our state appropriation, and about 40% comes from our local appropriation or our local mill levy for operating purposes. We also have a mill levy for capital purposes too. As you can see, in only 2 of those 8 years did our revenues come in below our expenses. Once in 2007, when we spent $600,000 more than we brought in, and in the fiscal year that just ended, unaudited, and this could go up a little bit, unaudited, we spent $3.6 million more than we brought in revenues. Now, behind all this, we also have reserves and cash balances. So there were beginning balances. Anytime we had a positive number at the bottom, that money was available next year to either go into our beginning cash balance or to be transferred over into our reserves and used for one-time expenditures. Okay? So that's just a snapshot that shows you how over the last 2 years we've been getting drastically close to spending all our revenues, and this past year how we did and exceeded it. So the big question is, how did we get to this point? And I've identified 3 criteria or 3 areas. The first, and they're in priority order of their contribution. I'll talk about each of these. The first one is incorrect budget assumptions that were made, especially in 2013, in putting together the budget for the fiscal year that was July 1st of 2013 through June 30th of 2014, the year that just ended. Those incorrect budget assumptions led us to greatly overestimate our revenues, to underestimate our expenses, and to deplete our cash reserves. And I'll go into more detail and some examples on that later. We also had a lot of staffing changes that took place, especially starting in 2013, but continued into this past fiscal year. And that is that the board was asked to approve a retirement incentive. And as a result of that, we lost a large number of individuals, many of whom had been at the college for a number of years. And so we lost a lot of institutional memory when those people left. And to make it worse, the estimated cost of that retirement incentive was $600,000. And I know as of today that cost us over $1 million. And there may be a few others that I'm still going to dig up. But anyway, the actual cost greatly exceeded the estimate. And I've already mentioned we lost some key personnel. We lost a lot of people in the area of finance. We did not have a vice president for finance and administration after June of 2013. Then in both 2012, but mostly in the fall of 2012, which was part of fiscal year 2013, and then again in calendar year 2013, we spent more money on small capital improvement projects, building renewal and replacement projects, and equipment renewal and replacement projects than we had budgeted for. And that all came out, those over expenditures ate into our reserves. Okay, so just to remind everybody, most higher education institutions keep their cash reserves in unrestricted plant funds. They can be moved back and forth as needed to instruction in general, but usually you keep the bulk of your cash reserves in unrestricted plant funds so that you don't spend them without doing it on purpose. Okay. Here's a list of timelines that I think affected these decisions. We had a new president that was started in September of 2012. In January, 5 months later, the board was asked to approve a 4-day work week for that summer. The estimated cost of savings was going to be $50,000 in savings. The best we can calculate, we only saved about $6,000. Our students did not like it, and so this summer we did not do it. In March of 2013, the board was informed that the administration had decided to implement a staff salary study at 100% of the market rate. Okay? And this included some fairly substantial increases for 50 of our staff members. The key thing here is that the board wasn't asked to approve this change, but was informed that it was going to happen. Then in April of 2013, the board approved a budget for the fiscal year that just ended, and that budget was approved based upon the assumptions and projections presented by management at that time. That budget did include the retirement incentive and the estimated cost of $600,000. Then in May, the board was asked to approve new faculty salary matrices and new staff compensation for the year. In August, the board was asked to revise the faculty salary matrix and increase the level at which new faculty would come in. Then in the fall, in November, the board placed the president on administrative leave. In December, the president's contract was terminated. I was asked to step in as acting president. I became the interim president at the end of January. And then in this past April, we presented a final budget adjustment, that's a bar request, number 2 for the fiscal year that was going to end June 30th, because we have to put in a final budget to the Higher Education Department for state approval. And then we approved a new budget for fiscal year 15, which is the year that we are currently in that started July 1st. Now, I want to give you an example of some of those budget assumptions that were made in 2013 that have greatly impacted our ongoing cost. And I do want to make some comments which I've made before. Faculty and staff deserve what they're paid and deserve to be paid more if we could find the dollars. The examples I'm giving are just going to be examples of how decisions have impacted our budget. In 2013, we had a number of staff positions, 12-month staff positions, who had teaching responsibilities, some of which taught quite a bit. So the decision was made to convert those staff positions to 12-month faculty positions. That cost us about $23,000, and those new salaries were based upon the new faculty salary matrix. We were also, the board had been asked to approve in May a new full-time faculty salary matrix, which included band increases and step increases going from 7 steps to 10 steps possible. And the estimated cost of implementing that for current full-time faculty was $345,000. And also in that budget that was approved in April, it was noted that we were going to hire 5 new full-time faculty positions, but no money was budgeted for them because the money for them was going to come from savings from a reorganization that was taking place in the academic affairs area. I cannot find any of those savings, to be honest with you, but I do know that implementing that new full-time faculty salary matrix for existing faculty and hiring 11 new faculty instead of 5 had an almost $2.4 million impact on our budget. Ongoing cost. We also know that the estimate, and what these are is just estimates from what was proposed in 2013. The estimate for a new adjunct faculty salary matrix was an increase of cost of $151,000. The estimate for increasing and giving equity adjustments to those 50 persons in the staff study was $134,000. And the cost of living adjustment that was given to everybody except full-time faculty, unless they were at the maximum, of 2.5% cost us $382,000. There was over $3 million in ongoing cost added to the budget, or really the expenditures of last year, and we did not have that level of an increase in revenues. So I've got a proposed solution, and it's going to consist of 2 parts. One is some assumptions on how we can get some more revenues in, cash in sooner, or generate some more revenues. And then the other is going to be related to how do we cut cost in a variety of areas. From meetings we had down at the state capitol on Monday, I am assuming that we can get our state appropriation funded to us faster. We are not going to request any increase in what was appropriated to us for the year, which we normally get in 1/12 each month. But we're going to ask that they forward fund us 3 months. So I'm going to ask that what we would normally receive in April, May, and June of next year, we receive in September of this year. And that's going to help us with our cash flow situation. I'm also going to recommend that we go to the New Mexico Board of Finance and seek a loan of $500,000, which we would probably be able to repay in April, May, or June of the following year because of our cash flow situation. And then I'm going to recommend to the board that everybody has to contribute to this solution, including students. And I'm going to recommend that tuition be increased by at least $5 per credit hour effective in January. Then the cost side of the house is the tough side of the house for those of us who work here. And that is we've got to cut some ongoing cost. We've gone through and scrutinized every supplies and expense budget for every department. We've pulled out those costs that we know are fixed costs that can't be reduced. And then as a general rule, most departments will see a 30% reduction in their supplies and expense budget for this fiscal year. That includes things like office supplies, instructional supplies, travel, contractual agreements, dues and subscriptions, those types of situations. There are some departments whose budgets are so small that there will be no recommended cost cuts. There's a number of positions that are currently vacant. Some of those are positions that have been vacant that were in last year's budget. Some are new positions that were included in this year's budget. We've identified which of those we can keep vacant. We do have to fill some positions. I'll talk about that later. But the ones that we've identified, we're going to keep vacant, and they're vacant for the foreseeable future until we have revenues to be able to pay them. So those are ongoing savings of about $1.3 million. Still not enough to get us to the $3 million that we need of ongoing cost reductions. So I'm going to recommend that through a restructuring of the college, and I'll go through my criteria for this in a few minutes, that we're going to have a reduction in force. We're going to eliminate about 2.5% of our full-time positions through a reduction in force that will take place immediately, with the savings coming in varying stages because some positions have to be given notice longer than others. And that's going to save us about $888,000. So that gives us the $3 million of ongoing savings that we need to be solvent going forward. But then we get down to the harder part, and that's how do we get rid of some of these one-time costs? We've got a cash flow problem, and you're going to see on a slide later. We're going to delay all purchases that can be delayed till January. But our criteria, both in cutting cost and vacancy savings and reduction in force, is to have minimal impact upon students and instructional programs. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later. But to get some one-time savings, the only thing that we've been able to come up with so far is to do some across-the-board salary cuts for all faculty and staff. And this includes staff that are on grants because they're part of our cash flow problem, okay? Even if you're funded by restricted monies. My recommendation to the board is that anybody who makes less than $30,000 a year will not see a cut. That anybody who makes between $30,000 and up to $40,000 would see a 2% salary cut. Anybody making $40,000 up to $75,000 would receive a 4% salary cut. Anybody making $75,000 up to $100,000, a 6% salary cut. Anybody who's making $100,000 or more, an 8% salary cut. Those salary cuts would be effective with the payroll that starts August 23rd and would go through June 30th of next year, roughly 10 months of the year. If things were to improve in the spring, I would certainly not hesitate to come back to the board to think of rescinding those earlier than July 1st. The plan right now is people's salary would go back to what it was on July 1st of 2015, but that's contingent upon funding be available. This plan, which I'm very confident with, we should be able to get there. Still got to find another $500,000 in one-time cuts. Some of that will come from delays. Some will come from new vacancies that we get that we just hold vacant for a while. And then I've challenged faculty and staff to make recommendations to me as to how we can find another $500,000. So this would take into account cutting almost $4.5 million of what I think is a $5 million problem. If those assumptions for forward funding of our state appropriation and the loan from the Board of Finance do not come through, some of these may have to be changed. We might have to either increase the number of positions subject to a reduction in force or increase the salary cuts. My indications are that the likelihood of getting the forward funding and getting the loan look pretty good, okay? But I can't guarantee it. So back to my guidelines. Some of these I've already mentioned. Minimize impact on students and instructional programs. We're going to consider elimination of non-essential, non-academic programs. I'm looking at trying to flatten the non-instructional management structure or infrastructure. We're going to look at all departments that are non-instructional departments and identify some positions that are non-essential. Doesn't mean we don't need them and can't use them. It just means we can still operate if we eliminate those positions. So those are the basis of any reduction in force. As I've said, any salary cuts would be in place until June 30th and would go back into effect with your old salary on July 1st if funding is available. Where possible, temporary and probationary staff will be impacted before regular staff. And I'm going to request that we do a restructuring process, which is identified in policy 4-40. and we're going to follow those guidelines. And in there, it talks about the amount of notice that will be given to any employees that are going to be, whose job is going to be eliminated. The amount of notice will be based upon policy. And any regular employee who does get their job eliminated will have the right to open positions for which they meet minimum qualifications, and that's for 6 months. I do want to say that we have some positions already identified for some of the people whose jobs are going to be eliminated. In many cases, those positions will be grant funded, or at least are partially grant funded, and in some cases they may be at a lower salary rate, but at least it's a position. And so those offers will be made to some of those people. Others just need to keep their eye out for positions that become open, and if they meet minimum qualifications, they will be considered. They will have first right of refusal, and if there's more than one person that meets the criteria, we will hire people back based upon seniority. So the people who have the most years experience will be hired back first, and so forth. A couple other actions that I'm considering, some of which I haven't been able to come up with the exact numbers yet. My plan is that any full-time staff and 12-month faculty who take a pay cut, I plan to award them with some number of days of administrative leave with pay to make up for having to work more for less money. Those leave days, though, would have to be approved by their supervisor and cannot impact students in delivery of instructional programs. The full-time faculty who are on 9-month contracts who don't have annual leave and work just certain days during the year, my recommendation right now is to have their college service requirement reduced by some number of hours. But I've expressed to Faculty Senate that I'm open to other recommendations on that one. Another position that we will be eliminating effective immediately is during this reorganization 18 months ago, we implemented 10.5-month faculty positions, most of which are chairs for departments. The extra cost of those 10.5-month position is greater than what we think would be the benefit of it, so we're going to go back to how we used to do it, and that is pay hourly rates for department chairs in the summer and in between semesters as needed. I already talked about cutting supplies and expense budget, most of them by 30%. All out-of-state travel is going to have to be approved by the president, and it's going to be limited unless you have grant funds to cover it or unless it's related to accreditation. We are going through an accreditation process this year, so we do have to do accreditation. We do not have a hiring freeze, but all new hires will have to be approved by the president. We have positions we have to fill. We've got key positions like Vice President of Finance, Executive Director of Human Resources, Controller positions that we need to fill. But we also have positions that we have to fill in order to maintain the safety of our operations, whether it's our operations or our classes, or even to meet accreditation or legal requirements. So we will be filling those positions when necessary. To control purchasing, I'm going to ask that all purchases, no matter what amount, have to be approved by a member of the executive team or me. It's going to put a burden on the executive team because there's lots of $5 requests and not so many $100,000 requests. And I'm going to ask everybody, any purchase that can wait till after December needs to be delayed. Once we get through December and we receive our county appropriation for the year, which comes in 2 big chunks every year, we'll be in decent shape from a cash flow standpoint. And then one other change we're going to make for this year is that any staff who teach during their normal work hours, if they continue teaching with the approval of their supervisor, will not get paid for teaching. It will be considered part of their workload. If they teach outside of their normal work hours, evenings, weekends, whatever their normal work hours are, they can still get paid as adjunct faculty. So that's one of the things we're doing. A couple others, just to let everybody know, I've reassigned Amy Tilley, who's been an assistant vice president in finance, to be an executive budget director reporting directly to me. I've got to have access to somebody doing analysis and keeping track of things that reports to me and not somewhere else down in the organization. So that will be a reassignment at her current salary structure. The governing board is going to participate in this. The one thing they can really give up is their out-of-state travel, so they've agreed to not do any out-of-state travel this year. I'm going to contribute to this situation by giving up the discretionary portion of my salary, which is $30,000 per year, which would normally go towards the president's housing allowance, car allowance, cell phone allowance, and money to participate in things you want the college to participate in, which costs money. And I'm also going to cut the president's office travel budget in half, and that's where I'm going to really provide the travel to those out-of-state trips for most people. So I'm going to control that by putting it in my budget. And then, as I said before, any vacant positions that we've identified as part of the vacancy savings will stay vacant. And any positions that are eliminated due to the reduction in force will stay eliminated until approved by the president and ongoing funding sources have been identified. And the last thing that I've talked to all the faculty and staff today that could come. We had to have 2 sessions because we overflowed the room. This is something we can do. We're all in it together. If we stay focused on our mission, which is empower students and strengthen community, it'll help us get through. Most of us are here because we wanted to be involved in education. Education is a public service job. And sometimes we don't get paid as much as we probably should be, and in some cases we have to take cuts to do so. But if we'll stay focused on serving our students and serving our community, we can get through this. At the same time, I want to say we're going to continue to move forward. Even though we're going to have to get into some of these cuts this year, we've got to be moving forward as a college. We've got to be looking at new programs to start that meet the needs of our community, the needs of our students. We're going to have to get external funding to get those started, but we're going to be looking for that. We have to grow in the future. We've got to have growth in student credit hours, increased tuition revenues, increased funding from the state because we grow. We've got to keep moving forward. And as I've mentioned before too, we've got to be a 21st century quality community college, which means we have to all our systems up and running. We've got to have high functioning IT infrastructure, which means supporting it, and we've got to have accurate and timely data upon which we're making decisions. That'll keep us moving forward. That'll help us avoid getting into this situation again. And I do want to say, remind everybody that the governing board has to ensure the solvency of the college. They have no choice but to do this. They've been involved in these discussions for months. And I'm going to encourage all the faculty and staff that everybody needs to go above and beyond if they can. And we can get through this. And this is really, it's a one fiscal year problem that we can solve. It's really 10 months. And the fact that we can solve it in 10 months is pretty incredible. But we have to solve it in 10 months because we don't have the cash otherwise. So, Madam Chair, that's my recommendation.
Thank you. I want to thank you, President Grisham, for working on, to identify these problems which occurred before January of 2014 when you became the interim president. I think that you have done a good process by involving your executive team, by meeting with the staff, Senate leadership, the staff, Senate leadership, and the faculty, Senate leadership. The board, as you said, has been very involved. We have a finance committee, and you have worked with the finance committee. So I think that the solutions that you have presented to us over the last few months are ones that can work for the college. And I would like to entertain some comments from other board members before we make the motion.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to commend Randy and his executive team to working so really hard to make some hard choices, but that are necessary. I think this is a family that needs to take care of each other. We need to be proud of what we've done over the last 30 years for our students. After all, it's about the students. It's not about us, it's about the students. And it is so difficult for me as a board member to have to make some of these hard decisions, because I know the emotional turmoil that each individual that's going to be impacted. But overall, I think we're going to become a much more stronger institution. We have learned some very valuable lessons. We're asking much more in-depth questions about not only finances, but accountability as to of each member of our faculty and staff. So I'm particularly proud of what President Grisham has done in taking this leadership to where he has. And I commend my colleagues on this board to have spent so many hours in analyzing and doing what we could to lessen the impact to individuals. But I think if we all come together, we're going to get through it.
Madam Chair, first of all, a request from the President for some additional information. So when we talk about how we got here, thank you for taking us through that timeline of assumptions. But what I would love to see and make available to everyone as part of this plan is what those exact assumptions were that were approved by the board. In terms of salary savings from the restructuring that we did, number one, in reducing the number of deans. There was a proposal made and savings associated with that. And what I'd love to see in the end is what the actual savings were. And I know that those numbers have been a little bit hard for you to get at in the budget, but I think it would be helpful for all of us to understand in the process of how we got here of what those assumptions were. This governing board voted on some very important policy changes for the college last year, which was changing a matrices for the faculty salary compensation, which was a good thing for the school, which I voted for. But we did that with certain assumptions that we would be able to afford it. And now, as we see, that didn't pan out, but I think it would be helpful to see those exact numbers. The second part of that is that under the how did we get here is some costs that were done in capital, some capital projects that were done in 2012 and 2013. And I would respectfully request that we have a list of what those projects were, what they cost, and also if the board was aware and approved those projects when they came through.
And Madam Chair, Member Keith, I have that list. I do not think the board was asked to approve any of those projects.
Okay. Thank you, and I would appreciate you sharing that. And again, I think that should be part of the public conversation. We're all in this together, and I think everybody deserves access to that information and a better understanding of how we got to where we are today. With that, I want to mirror what board member Cedillo has said, in that there are none of these that are easy decisions to be making today. But the reality of the situation is we are where we are, and our commitment is to get the school as healthy as we can, as quickly as we can, and not impact the services that we provide to students at this college. So I want to say thank you to Interim President Grissom for all his work on this, a plan and putting together hours and hours of thought about how we do the work that we need to do. I also want to say I'm so glad that you have the private sector background that you do, which I think has been really helpful to us in looking at revenues and expenses and understanding what's core to our mission and how we can do what we need to do with the least impact to that mission.
Willie.
Good afternoon. I know it's a difficult decision. We have to support each other in that way. And it's my suggestion. I know that you're going to increase $5 the credit. Also get the opportunity to ACA funding has also an increase maybe of 50 cents per credit. And also we have also the opportunity to separate the funding of the student government activities in other funding, and some way SGA can get its own priorities, at the same time the school can cover its own priorities. Also, I have to say, I know they are working very hard to make a solution of this, and it's a difficult situation. Like a student, I understand that, and we need to keep the priorities on the students. And I know you are take care about that, and I have to say thank you on that too. Okay.
Thank you. Chris?
I've learned in these last 6 years or 5.5 years that the board and the president are the ones that are, responsible, and I can see that we've been through a lot. As a former employee, as a former, employee here at the community college, I love this place, and I think that Randy and I have been, from the very beginning, we've been through a lot, and we've seen this college go through many, many things. It's been a difficult year for me, and I see that there's a lot of stuff that we need to do. There's a lot of stuff we need to do, and the thing I feel the most uncomfortable with, and I think it's important for me to say this, is the reduction in force. But it's something that's necessary. It hurts me because I was part of that. I was part of the employers and the employees that are here, and I've been part of it. And I've always, there was times that there was rumors that we might have to reduce, and it did hurt. And I know that you all as employees feel that, and you feel that, and I feel that, Randy, the things that you're doing are straight up honest, and you're doing the best you can, and you're giving us information as a board. I personally don't see in the things that you've shown us that there's any favoritism. You're doing what needs to be done, and I really respect that. As a former employee, once again, it does hurt, and some of your colleagues that are going to be part of the reduction in force, it's going to be hard, and I hope that your spirit is there, and that you're there to give some encouragement to some of those folks, whoever that might be. It's an important thing to be part of a family. You have to support each other, and I think that's an important thing. That we do support each other and that we move on. You look at this is a bad example maybe, but you look at what's going on in this world, and I was on the plaza the other day, and I wrote this thing down saying, well, why are people hating each other? Why are people fighting with each other? I don't think we need to do that here. I don't think we need to be examples of fighting with each other and doing this and that. I think we need to move on, and I'm not one that I can see what's gone on. I understand what's gone on, but I'm also one that wants to look forward. And I've said that. I want to move forward. I want to be positive, and it's always a better thing to look forward and say, yeah, we are going to be able to do it, and we are going to be able to do the things we need to do. I support you, and I've said that in our private meetings also. I support you, Randy, because I think that, I've seen you've lost probably more sleep than any of us have, and that you've been into it, man, and I really appreciate that. As a former employee and as a friend of yours, not just because you're the interim president or because I'm a board member, but as a friend, I really appreciate what you're doing for this college. I really do, man. Thank you.
Martha?
First of all, I want to thank President Grissom for the incredible diligence in the analysis that he has done, helping us understand that there were issues that we didn't quite know how to put into a factual basis, but being able to find and dig and look at all the things that we were not privy to, but that we needed to know in order to be well informed and to make good decisions. That has been incredibly useful. And so thank you, Randy, for that. I am so pleased that we have someone who has the background to be able to help us through that. Secondly, I want to thank the faculty and staff in advance for the work that you are about to undertake. I know this is difficult. I know it will be costly for you in emotion and in salary and in the amount of work that you are being asked to undertake. But I also want to say how proud I am of the professionalism that you have shown and are showing in undertaking this very difficult task that we have before us. So as a board member, I know that these are not easy decisions. They have not been an easy decision for the board to look at all this material and to come up with and to understand the places where we perhaps have erred and perhaps have not had enough information or have not dug enough to find out what we really needed to know. So I want to thank you, all of you, for helping us to keep Santa Fe Community College an outstanding institution, an outstanding service to our community. The thing that I am probably most proud of in this whole process is that the basic assumption has been that we will do this with as little impact on our students and our community as possible. That to me is worth a tremendous amount, and I thank you all for undertaking that and for believing and being willing to understand and to offer that. So with that said, since we've all spoken, I would move that we approve the financial stability plan as it has been outlined by the interim president, including his restructuring recommendations and the recommended salary adjustments. I also want included in the motion the statement that as defined in Policy 440, the President's determination that a restructuring is in the best interests of the college is not subject to challenge. That's my motion.
Second? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I'd like to say publicly what I said to all of you who were at the last two sets of meetings, that on behalf of myself as a board member and the board, I want to apologize to you for the suffering that you are going to experience by having salary cuts. And I appreciate everything that you have done and your professionalism and how you have reacted to this. I know the rumor mill was out there, and I think that we made some improvements just overnight in the way to approach this, but I am so sorry that you all are going to have to go through this, and thank you for pulling together for the betterment of our college and the students that we serve. Mr. President? Anything else?
I also want to thank everybody. This was a day that I didn't want to ever have to address. I am pleased at the response of both my executive team and the faculty and staff today, and want to assure you that we're going to get through this. It's not going to always be easy. I'm going to keep everybody in communication. I also regret that we have to go this route, but we have to save the college, and we have to serve our students and our community. And and in advance, I want to just thank everybody for, I know from watching everybody's face today that everybody's going to give their all, and we're going to make it through, and maybe we'll fix it before June 30th. I hope so. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the agenda, since I don't have one? All right. The motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, yes?
Sorry,
Sure. Come.
On the way over here, I just heard a rumor that I'd heard before, and that people were very upset because they've heard that the president has given some of his executive team members huge increases in their salaries.
That rumor is totally untrue.
Every person in this college, except those under $30,000 salary, is getting a salary cut. Everyone. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. No, and nobody's salary has been raised so that it can be cut.
Call the question.
So, it's time for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Bueno, pásale.